Hello and welcome in to another episode of the Fantasy Football Forecast. We're doing another live episode together here. I'm Trevor Scott with my co-host.
What's going on, guys?
And we are going to get into a 10-round mock draft. So we're going to do a little bit abbreviated, just one bench. So we'll fill out the starter and take a bench player. So we have started the draft here. We took the fourth pick, and the first four picks before us were Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, and Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah, so for this, obviously being a Superflex format, we also did 3 wide receiver, which is similar to our home league. So, we're on the clock with the fourth pick. As you can see, Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, Patrick Mahomes have all gone off the board. And, for the purpose of this pick, I think we're going to start with Christian McCaffrey here.
And, the chances that he's available at 4, very low. And that's what we talked about, knowing your league and knowing how it's going to go when you're mock drafting and making sure you have realistic expectations. But for the purpose of the content, we're going to take McCaffrey because obviously if this does happen, McCaffrey is absolutely the pick at this spot. The
quarterback flying.
All right. So obviously, too, this is a different website than the one we used on Sleeper, right? So this is the Fantasy Pros version of the mock draft simulator. And so clearly in Superflex, they prioritized quarterbacks way more than our league will, and then maybe your league will. But if your league does prioritize quarterback in this way, you're going to end up with a lot of good options here in your second pick. So we saw CD, we saw Tyreek, we saw Jamar Chase, and I'll go off with Breece Hall. So with 3 wide receivers, 2 quarterbacks, we're not going to be going running back again. But with the drop-off in quarterback, we are going to be looking at receiver with Justin Jefferson. It feels like there's a tier drop-off after Jefferson at the receiver position, so we want to make sure we don't miss out on that tier of players. More quarterbacks.
This might be tough.
So Purdy and Caleb Williams went. If we're just going to take this simulator for what it's worth, obviously with 10 teams, ideally the quarterbacks wouldn't go off as quickly in the simulator, but for the purpose of the draft, we can maybe look at the overall for a second here with what's left, right? And not a lot of quarterbacks show up in even any of these top picks here. So we're probably going to move away from quarterback again, and I think we both agree that Garrett Wilson.
That's the play. And again, too, this is a 3 wide receiver league, so it'll be very interesting to see at the end of this draft kind of how these teams that went QB heavy stack up. Because if you're starting McCaffrey, Jefferson, and Garrett Wilson, and you can find value late at QB, do it.
And we're going to watch a couple more quarterbacks off, right? But only 3 quarterbacks during that turn. So a lot less quarterbacks are starting to go off here, right? And when we talk about evaluating and looking down at quarterbacks 15 to 20 to even down to 22, 23, if there are multiple players in that range of quarterback that you like, doing this type of strategy is going to benefit you, especially if you hit on any of those quarterbacks and they become top 12. Your roster is just going to be very difficult to beat if your quarterbacks are able to relatively keep up and get your overall point total up when you have these very star players at all your other positions here. So, let's take a look at the running backs, right? We got Josh Jacobs and Devon Achane. We got wide receiver here. Brandon Ayuk, Chris Olave. We both really love those 2 players. And at tight end, we still have everybody available to us in the middle of the 4th round here. But I think at quarterback, we've waited quite a bit. We're starting to get down into that 15 to 20 range. And so I don't know what you're thinking.
I want to smash Justin Herbert because this is like, the type of guy that has a very high ceiling. So let's do that.
Yeah. And getting in on quarterback, right? You got to try and play the draft a little bit, right? Even if you don't feel like it's the right value, or you feel like you're reaching a little bit, that's okay in terms of Superflex leagues when you're getting in on a player that you like, but you just would prefer to get around later. You want to make sure you lock that player in. And, you see, obviously, Chris Olave went and Josh Jacobs went, both guys we mentioned, but at receiver, Brandon Ayuk didn't get picked. So now we're in a position where we maybe would have taken him in the 4th round. Herbert could have gone, but now we're in a position where, we could still take that same player if we wanted to, right? Not saying that we necessarily have to. Um, so looking at the overall board, we got Rashad White. We've still got the quarterbacks on the board here. And, looking all the way down into, the 22, 23 range with Baker and Geno, I'm not entirely sure that we'd be upset with having any of those guys as our starters. So maybe we pass on quarterback here. And so for me, right, Travis Kelce's still on the board. I don't know that that's going to happen in a lot of leagues where he's left in the 5th round. That would be where I would go.
I think I'm still inclined to take Brandon Ayuk just because, he's got that top 10 upside. This is 3 wide receiver. We've got our RB1 locked and loaded. And like you mentioned before, from the quarterback position, there's guys a little bit deeper that, we feel comfortable with. And when you're looking at the draft board, if all these teams have gone, pretty much all of them have gone to QB already, there's a good chance that they're going to be loading up on skill position guys at this point. So I think Ayuk, and let's just see what tight end happens.
And as you look down the receiver board, right, like Ayuk feels like a lot more locked and loaded of a receiver pick than some of these other guys. Obviously, Evans and DJ Moore, Nico, they're all very solid players, but Ayuk feels a tier above that. And what he was saying about tight end, right, is that you got that tier 4 at the top. So maybe even one of them falls to us in the 6th round. But like going down even to Evan Ingram, David Njoku, Jake Ferguson, like these guys are going to be very good starters this year. And tight end down at the bottom hasn't felt like that locked in a couple of years. We say it every year, but this year, not to say like, but this year feels different. I feel like we say that too. But there are players that have a reasonable path to a lot of touches here. So I can get on board with that. So let's go Brandon Ayuk, see what happens with the tight end position. A lot of receivers. Yeah, and so look at Kelce was the only tight end that went between then and now. And look at all the receivers that went, right? Like we would have been in a much worse position at receiver with Kupp and Cooper and Higgins as our top options here. And we're still going to get somebody in that tier 1 of tight ends. So if you start seeing tight ends get pushed down and you're not sure why, this is exactly why right here, because you want to try and make sure you get in on these other positions when the tight end, especially at the top of tight end, is deeper than it's been in a very long time. So let's check in on all the other positions. We got Mixon and Kenneth Walker with Alvin Kamara and Aaron Jones at the top of running back. Feels like a bunch of players there. And again, in 10-team, the reason we say that quarterbacks get spread out more in 10-team leagues is we're down in the 6th round right now. We're one of the only teams without 2 quarterbacks, and we're going to have our pick of one of these 5 guys on screen right here between Cousins, Stafford, Rodgers, Watson, and Mayfield. And all of those guys are acceptable starters and have top 12 upside on any given week at the quarterback position. And so, we can even continue to wait here and go in a different position because there's still 5 guys that are pretty reasonable in terms of being a solid starter. So we have our receivers. We have our top 3 receivers locked in. We can still go receiver. But my opinion, I think I said it last round, I was itching to go Kelce. I think I'd go Mark Andrews here.
Or
Oh, upgrade for free.
Thanks, Fantasy Pros.
So a couple of the receivers we were talking about, Kamara went, McBride, right? So good thing we went tight end there. There would have been a good, decent chance anyways that both of those tight ends would have been gone. We'd have been looking later in the draft if we had waited. So at this pick here now, let's take a look at all, right? We still need a second running back, and we still need a second quarterback and a flex spot. So we still have 3 starters that we're looking at here. A lot of quarterbacks are going to be at the top of the overall ranks. So if we slide down a little bit, we got Mixon, Kenneth Walker, T. Higgins, George Pickens. But I think at this point is where I'd be looking to go quarterback, especially if it's Matthew Stafford. I think that with Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp, you got some pretty elite weapons there for him. And he's obviously very good in his own right and has top 12 upside on any given week. So I'm in on Stafford.
Yeah, I agree with that because at this point too in your drafts, and maybe it'll be a little bit different with the auto draft of the computer. You're going to see guys taking their 3rd quarterback, and so if you miss out on this tier, then you're setting yourself up in a very bad spot. So there is a chance that some of these guys can make it back to us, but we need to make sure we're not putting ourselves in a huge hole. So I like Stafford here.
There goes a pretty big tier of running backs for us too. So looking back now, right? Only Deshaun Watson got picked at quarterback, and we still would have had Rodgers or Mayfield. Versus look at the tier and running back that just went. We just had 7 running backs go between our picks there, and now we're looking at James Conner, Tony Pollard, Najee Harris as our second starter at running back. So hindsight, maybe we should have gone in on one of those running backs there. Neither of us are a fan of Joe Mixon. So that's why we weren't really considering running back there, because he was the top option. But ideally, we would have been able to get one of these players, especially even like Zamir White or Aaron Jones, right? Those are kind of my two favorites in that area. And now it's feeling like, I don't know if we want to force a running back pick here just because we need one, but we do still have a flex pick open, so we can still pick a wide receiver. So what do you think here?
Yeah, I think receiver's the play because we're going to be starting 4 wide receivers in this format. We've obviously got 3 top 10 guys already filled out, but we're going to be starting 4 pretty much every given week, just especially with this hero RB build. So looking at this board, we've got Tank Dell, we've got Christian Kirk, Terry McLaurin, Calvin Ridley, Jaden Reed, Godwin, Hollywood. To me, I'm kind of inclined. I love Tank Dell, but I'm kind of inclined to go Calvin Ridley here. If you haven't checked out our Tennessee Titans breakdown, we talk about them wanting to be the one. We talked about improvements they've made on offense, how we expect Will Levis to hopefully take a step forward. So I think his upside is enough for me to take a shot on him here. We've kind of seen McLaurin, what he is over the years. Kirk is a safe bet, so is Tank, but I don't know. Let's go with a little upside.
And if you haven't seen the short, we did a short on the Tennessee Titans offense as a whole. Everybody on the offense is getting pushed down because they're not expected to be a good offense. But when you look at the actual playmakers that they have on the team, it feels like this offense is going to be better than advertised, especially if Will Levis does take that second year step forward. So I'm in on taking Ridley. A lot more running backs, so we still need that. We still need that last running back. And since we're we're only doing 2 more rounds here, this is going to be the last player in our starting lineup. So looking at this, right, we're obviously not taking Nick Chubb. Tony Pollard is in an interesting spot. I personally really like Tony Pollard, but a lot of people are not in on him, especially with how good Tajay Spears was last year as a rookie. Devin Singletary is going to be the starter for the Giants, so he's in a position to really take over that starting role. And the rest of these guys down here, I'm not sure we're going for. So
I think here at running back, because this is somebody that we're going to need to start right away. Obviously we're going to shy away from someone like Jonathan Brooks, who you're going to have to be more patient with. Maybe obviously Nick Chubb, you're going to have to be very patient with. I kind of like Singletary here because I know he's going to be getting a lot of touches, at least early in the season. And going with this hero RB build, it gives us flexibility to kind of attack the position from the waiver wire, maybe make a trade at some point. But for now, knowing that we're going to have to start this guy, I want to go with the guy that I know is going to get the most touches.
Yeah, and I agree with that for sure with this build. I also think that Devin Singletary is one of these interesting early season players. Like a lot of us are going to be having the same thing. Like, oh yeah, obviously Singletary, but he's going to get pushed up if they don't sign somebody else. So if somebody watching is like, you can't take Singletary, they're going to be bringing in somebody else to kind of compete for touches. That's a fair argument and complaint, right? But as currently constructed in the running back room for the Giants, he's going to step into a massive workload to start the season. So I really like him in a hero RB build, especially to step in and take your RB2 position at the beginning of the year. Oh, there go all the tight ends. There you go. So if you're looking for where the tight ends go after that top tier, right? You got all of them right here in round 9. And that's going to be common in this build with Superflex and 3 wide receivers, right? You got 9 starters that aren't your kicker in your defense. And so tight end will generally anyways kind of get filled in here at the end. Obviously too, we only did 1 bench, so all those teams needed a tight end as well. So, so they ended up taking him there, but yeah, so that's generally where the next tier of tight ends will go. All right, and what do you want to do here with our last pick? I think we need to go running back again.
Yeah.
Need to get somebody that we like here.
Yeah. I mean, I'll let you take this one, but I'm kind of inclined for Gus Edwards. Just, we've seen his ability to get in the end zone on a run heavy team, and that's exactly what the Chargers are going to be and want him to do. Anyone else down here? Not Ty Chandler. Not to some of these names too, right? Like if you start robust RB and you want to take a shot on a higher upside guy late and you can afford to keep him on your bench, maybe someone like a Blake Corum. We've seen Kyron kind of have these nagging injuries. They're kind of a similar player. We never really know what McVay is going to actually do year for year, but again, he's not someone that we can feel comfortable, even remotely comfortable starting right away unless Kyron's on IL. So I kind of want to just go with the guy that I know the Chargers and Harbaugh are going to pound the rock to. But what do you think?
Yeah, we can do that, and I agree with the Gus pick. I think the touchdown upside for him specifically is very good. So in the 10th round, there just aren't very many players that have the opportunity share to even score 10 touchdowns, and I think Gus does have that level of upside in terms of scoring. And touchdowns are really difficult to predict. It's just at this point in the draft, getting somebody that you can plug in and has a shot to score, I think is worth taking a chance on. The reason I'm scrolled down here to Rico Dowdle is for content purposes. I think of all these guys, he's the guy that I'm the most interested in because he's the one that's uniquely in a position of all these guys to actually win the starting job. It's not going to be like exclusively him. He's not going to get 20 touches a game, but if he's the first one on the field, if he's playing on passing downs, if he's the 2-minute drill guy, I think that there's a good chance here that he has a very productive year in a way that Tony Pollard did a couple of years back on limited touches, right? I'm not predicting like a top 10 finish like Pollard had, but he could find his way into the top 25 and be a useful bye-week fill-in and a useful bench player that isn't somebody necessarily that you're going to be looking to cut. So I wanted to highlight him at the running back position late, although we do both agree that we like Gus better. All right. And with that, we got an A+. Look at that. I don't know that we've ever had that. Oh, no, that's senior draft grades. Never mind. They're just okay.
I like our draft.
Yeah. I think we did good here. Just a quick review. We have Herbert and Stafford as our quarterbacks. Again, we waited and took those guys a little later. Christian McCaffrey and Devin Singletary at running back. McCaffrey is just such a major advantage that it's good to have him. And then our receivers are stacked here. Justin Jefferson, Garrett Wilson, and Brandon Ayuk. You'll be hard pressed to find a better wide receiver trio than that coming out of draft unless you go receiver. So very happy with how this team turned out.
Likewise, man.
All right. And with that, we'll leave you guys today and we'll see you tomorrow.